Chapter 6 Flora's Gift of Healing. As soon as he was gone, I sat down on the stool by the bed and took Nabila's hand in mine. I inhaled deeply, closed my eyes, and reached down within to unlatch the barrier that contained the source of my light energy. It was strong and positive and easily surged within me like a tide rushing to meet the shore. I welcomed its nourishment, allowed the radiant aura to well within me, and then I slowly directed it to flow from my hands and into Nabila's. I am always fascinated by the aurascape that awaits me whenever I enter a body to heal. It is different every time and equally fascinating and terrifying. In my last year at the academy, Swami Rama took me to the gutters on the outskirts of London, where the homeless ranged from the mentally deranged to the terminally ill. He would walk quietly around the bodies, assessing health status, and then would choose a body for me to heal. I quickly became adept at recognizing energy signatures within each horoscope I connected with, and began to sense what their bodies lacked or struggled against. I also learned to distinguish between infection and disease. My strength was healing the core of the individual by infusing them with my own wellness to allow them to heal themselves. No two sessions were alike, and some sessions were more successful than others. Each encounter was a valuable lesson in understanding more about what my powers could do. Here, my energy entered Nabila's body without resistance, which I knew to be common in chronic or severe illness. This meant she had given up fighting her illness or had no strength to carry on, and that I needed to locate her energy source somewhere in her body. This would take time, and I needed to pace myself so as to maintain my own stamina. This is what Swami Rama called the search stage. In my mind, I drew a mental map of Nabila's physiology and slowly and methodically guided white light to each region, searching for her core energy source. Her aurascape was cold and bleak. It felt like walking through deserted rooms, cold, bare, and dark. Along the peripheries, I saw shadows lurking, but they did not notice my neutral light energy. I used my mental map to orient me as I traveled from the lower extremities through the torso, through the upper extremities, and finally through her crown. My initial scan was unsuccessful, and I returned my ball of energy to the center of her body. I needed to go deeper. This time, I needed to utilize the primal emotional aspect and sense for any residual energy clues in the hope of locating her hidden core energy. Once again, I prepared myself by inhaling deeply and closing my eyes, willing all my positive energy deeper into her aurascape, bringing with me a plethora of emotions: my love for my mother and father, my joy at being reunited with them, my sadness and loneliness at being separated from them during the early days at the academy, and on those rare occasions when I became homesick for India. As I traversed the bare aurascape, allowing memories and emotions to emit from me, I felt a pull, a metaphoric tug on my energy, and I quickly followed the direction of the traction, my white light vibrating faster as it recognized energy, and I located Nabila in the lowest quadrant of the heart chakra. Her energy was small, weak, and gray. She was exhausted and extremely sad. Upon sensing her distress, my gift automatically activated, and my energy began oscillating, turning into a brilliant emerald green color. But as I directed it to meet hers, there was much resistance. She was reluctant, scared, and unwilling. I projected my thoughts through my green light in an attempt to communicate with her and to alleviate her fears. I shared with her my memories of tea parties in our home garden, dolls sitting in rows in my bedroom, bedtime stories told to me by my mother, horse riding lessons with my father. The little gray light was watchful, but every time I attempted to come closer, she would become startled and dim down even further. I tried again and again, each time communicating my memories at different ages from my past, my trials and my successes at the academy, friendships made and broken, hoping that the range of emotions I shared would gain her trust, but to no avail. She would not let me near her to attempt to heal her, nor would she follow me out of her corner. After some time, I could feel my energy draining. I also realized that I was attracting the shadows from the corners as I quickly reverted to my neutral white light. It was also obvious that she was very weary of me as a stranger. Oh, how I wish I had gotten to know her before her illness so that she would recognize me. At this stage, my only conclusion was that she needed someone familiar whom she could trust, and I could think of no one better than her own son. This meant I had to tell Abdu my secret, which, in the past, had never been well received. I retreated back to my own body to refresh my energy and prepare myself for how I was going to approach Abdu and convince him to allow me to treat Nabila with his help. In Nabila's little room, I paced, stretching my arms, shrugging my shoulders, rolling my head from side to side to relieve the tension in my body. I reached for my pouch of dried fruit and replenished my sugar stores. I then walked out of the bedroom to find Abdu on a small lounge holding his rosary beads and reading a prayer book. I looked out of the window to discover that it was dark outside. I had indeed lost all track of time, and the gates to the fort would surely be closed by now. There would be consequences to this, but I could not allow the thought to distract me from my task at hand. Abdu looked up. "Any change?" he asked. I nodded and smiled ever so slightly. "Really?" He stood and rushed to the bedroom. As I followed him in, I was prepared for his quizzical glance, since Nabila looked just as she did when he had last left her. "Abdu, do you have an open mind?" I asked as I walked over to the stool by the bed and sat down. He frowned before replying, "Yes." "Do you trust me, Abdu?" This time, without any hesitation, he replied, "Yes, completely, Flora. What is this about?" I reached for Nabila's hands and held them both in my left, and then with my right hand I reached out for Abdu's. Taking my hand in his, he kneeled on the floor and rested his elbows on the bed. I looked at him intently. "Please trust me," I whispered. He furrowed his eyebrows in response. "Close your eyes," I said, and squeezed his hand gently. He complied, albeit the expression on his face was slightly perplexed. I needed to locate Abdu's light energy and convince it to follow me into Nabila's body, but the difficulty was that I knew I could not explain it convincingly to him. I had to show him. And I was very familiar with the reaction that inevitably occurred when mere men are confronted with the reality of the unknown. I had to try for Nabila's sake. I had also just asked Abdu to trust me, and now I needed to trust him. Very gently and very cautiously, I released my white light along my right hand, and as I pushed past the metaphysical boundary between us, I felt the familiar spike of the energy that was often mistaken for static shock between two bodies. No sooner did it enter Abdu's hand when his eyes flew open in surprise, and he yanked his hand from mine, backing up against the wall of the room. "Flora!" he exclaimed. "What was that?" His eyes were wide and his face pale. I inhaled deeply and released Nabila's hands. In response, I let my energy radiate through my fingers and pour out into the open air. Small specks of pure white light floated, glowing with pure energy, and coalesced to form into a tight ball of light visible in my hands, pure, brilliant, and strong. Abdu gasped, and his eyes grew wider with fear. "A'udhu billah, Flora! This is magic! Magic is evil! Magic is against the will of God! I will not use magic to heal my mother!" His words punched right to the core of me as my white ball dissipated instantly, and I fought against feelings of hurt and rejection. I had to stand up for myself. I had to make him understand. In previous encounters, I had never bothered or dared to explain who I was to people who were afraid or threatened by me, but in the past, no one had mattered to me as much as Abdu. "This is not magic, Abdu. This is light energy. We all have light energy inside us. It is our passion, our fears, our happiness, our sadness. I'm able to control mine and use it to heal people. This is who I am. It is a gift, and it's natural, like breathing and hearing and seeing. It is a sixth sense, and it's a blessing I was born with. When it manifested, I went away to the academy to learn how to control and use it. I'm a healer, Abdu. That is what I am." I implored him to understand, but did not move any closer to him. I could see his Adam's apple become so prominent as he swallowed hard, trying to understand what I was telling him. God created me like this. This is His work that I'm doing. I use His gift to do good. Abdu, please believe me. This is not dark magic. And then I said the one thing that I was constantly accused of. I am not evil. He came closer then, still weary but looking at me, seeing me for who I really was. "Do you believe me?" I whispered. He took a deep breath, and after a brief moment he asked, "The child at the orphanage, you took away the fever?" He still remembered. I nodded, without saying a word, and it seemed to alleviate his fear. Yes, I do believe you, Flora. You are a good person. This I know to be true. He knelt down by the bed again and placed his hands in my right hand. I trust you. My heart swelled as I let out a huge sigh of relief. I felt waves of powerful gratitude coursing through me, invigorating my core. Tell me what I need to do, he said, looking deeply at me. I need you to follow me to your mother. I found her, but she's weak and scared, and I think she'll only respond to you. He looked surprised. Is that possible? I beamed at him. Very much so, I nodded, and the look of hope and awe in his eyes was everything I needed to get started. He was ready. Oh, and one more thing, Abdu. When we're in there, trust yourself. Your energy is limbic, primal almost. It will know what to do. He nodded. And another thing, I reached out and placed Nabila's left hand in Abdu's right. I then held her right hand in my left and reached out to hold Abdu's left hand in my right. Whatever happens, do not let go. Do not let go of me, and do not let go of her. I shall not, he promised, very seriously. I began by sending my ball of white light once more through his right hand and was immediately greeted by Abdu's light energy. To my great surprise, his energy was red, strong, passionate, and very trusting. In my mind's eye, I watched as my ball of white light immediately changed to green. Not the green I recognized as the healing color of my powers, but as the complementary color chakra to red. Together, our life forces were a good, strong combination, and I felt his energy add to mine. He also must have sensed the surge in power because I could feel his heart rate accelerate and could sense his pulse all around us, so much so it was deafening. I gently enveloped his energy ball and flooded him with soothing calm until I sensed his pulse rate return to normal. I then guided him slowly into my body, along my upper torso and through my left hand into Nabila's. It was quicker navigating through my aurascape than his. The change in aurascapes from my body to his mother's shocked him at first. From my warm, vital surroundings to Nabila's cold, unwelcoming, almost lifeless existence, he paused for a moment, hesitant, unsure whether to proceed or to turn back. I circled around him again, infusing him with hope and confidence, reassuring him that together we could accomplish this. Once I felt his willingness to continue, I quickly led him deeper towards Nabila's heart chakra zone, all the while staying close to him and protecting us both with my white light to keep us hidden from the shadows and the darkness. She was exactly where I had left her, still small, her light energy a weak gray. She did not even look up when we were within view. I mustered up my energy and shared with her my memories of meeting Abdu for the first time at the clinic, how our friendship had unfolded and developed, the day he bought me gulabs, the way he taught me how to listen for the rasp of pneumonia, how to suppurate an ulcer, how to stitch a wound closed, our strolls in the afternoons to the corn vendor at the end of our street, and lastly, the beautiful scarf he gifted me at the country club. I had her attention now. She was leaning forward, interested, as if she was invested in those memories. I circled around Abdu, dropped my white light so that his energy was revealed to her. I pushed him towards her, hoping that she would recognize him. She did. I watched anxiously as she slowly moved towards him and seemed to disappear within his energy ball. She latched onto him with fine tendrils, and as she began drawing strength and energy from him, I noticed her aura color change from gray to blue. I recognized her spirit as a loyal, kind, and creative soul. As she gained her strength, I could see Abdu struggling to maintain his. I reached out to strengthen him with my emerald green healing powers and sent them traveling through him to nourish Nabila's starved life force. Slowly I inched us backwards, coaxing her out from the darkness and towards her solar plexus, where the core energy is normally happy to reside. She took her place easily enough there, but I immediately realized that I was going to have a problem unlatching her from Abdu. I needed to stop sustaining him long enough to start the process of separating them from one another. As I came between them and began prying them apart, I sensed desperation and fear in Nabila, and I saw a dark memory so vivid and so intense it felt like a punch to my solar plexus. It was the day Captain Braxton rolled up to Nabila's house, and while seated in a military carriage, ordered 2 soldiers to take Abdu away, back to England with him all those years ago. The memory was fresh, raw, and painful, and Nabila was left on the ground. after running after the carriage, reaching and crying for her young son who was torn from her arms. And she was accusing me of doing the very same thing here. No, I mustered all my authority and compassion, and very firmly I projected a mental image of the two of us surrounding her body on her bed in her room, and told her that she needed to wake up. Wake up, Nabila. Open your eyes. It's time to wake up now. I could hear Abdu's thoughts, projecting the same sentiments in Hindustani, urging her to wake up. I tried once again to pry her from Abdu's red energy ball, and before I could anticipate it, she lashed out and struck me. It was so unexpected and so violently forceful, I felt pain searing through me. I also recognized that she had broken the connection between us. She must have pulled her hand out of mine. Injured and dazed, I began to panic. The only way I could return to my body now was through Abdu's, but did I have the strength to traverse out of Nabila's and through Abdu's or escape as well? How was I going to ensure Nabila stayed where she was meant to? Could she also hurt Abdu? If he were to let go of her hand, we would both be trapped in her body and never make it out. The thought was terrifying. The pain was intensifying now. Every moment my energy was outside of my body meant I was getting weaker. Think, Flora, think. And then I heard his voice. Flora, what's happening? In all my experiences of aura escaping, I have never been able to communicate by voice, only by memories and thought, but somehow I was now able to hear Abdu's voice. I have lost connection with her, which means we will have to make our way out through your body instead of mine. I panted, looking around for another path to take, and I spotted one across the distance, an uncharted trail I was not familiar with. It was our only choice. I limped towards that direction, beckoning to Abdu, who was still connected to Nabila. You must get her to unlatch, I pleaded. It took a moment, but Abdu began projecting his memory of the day he returned to India, after being away for all those years. The smell of the motherland, the sound of the people in the markets, the smells in the air, the intoxicating feeling of coming home was so strong. I knew it well. He then followed it by another memory of the day he walked into his village, inquiring as to the whereabouts of his mother, and of the joyful reunion between them both. The emotions here were overwhelming. Despite my agony, I could sense the connection between them, and the impact those memories made were genuine and precious. I heard his voice in my head once more, but this time he spoke to his mother in Hindustani. He began projecting memories of their daily routine, of him leaving to work each morning and returning in the afternoon to kiss her forehead and bring her ingredients for dinner. He pleaded with her once more, and slowly I watched as her energy ball began unlatching and turned into a sparkling color of brilliant blue. Her energy had been healed, and she was once more in control of herself. Abdu reached for me, and together we turned, looking for another way out. As we emerged out of the lower aspect of Nabila's aura escape, we fought our way through legions of foreign obstacles. As Nabila's life source awoke, it attracted the invading force of malaria, which came streaming at us, followed by a second legion, which could only be the Cinchona bodies, stepping into the arena to serve their purpose. I shielded us both as best I could by dampening our auras with white light. Shades and shadows rushed past us, thundering, as we hugged the peripheries, being chased away by the Cinchona warriors, but I was also painfully aware that they were honing in on Nabila's energy. I prayed she had enough to ward them off, while the Cinchona played their part. I was stumbling now, extremely weak and drained, but we had made it out of Nabila's body and into Abdu's. The aura escape here was warm and welcoming. Slowly, we made our way until we reached the boundary between my body and Abdu's. I could barely move now. My left side felt like it had been shredded to pieces, exposed nerve endings, sending signals to every living cell in my body. The pain was immense. I felt my stomach lurch, wanting to purge, but there was nothing to expel. Abdu's red ball was beside me, and all of a sudden I felt him merge within me, and I heard his voice again. Even the darkest night will end, and the sun will rise. Have courage, Flora. Stay strong. I'm with you. How powerful his words were. What strength they imparted. With one final push, I was able to open the barrier between our two bodies just enough, and very slowly squeeze my aura back into my own body. Once there, I breathed a sigh of relief. As I sensed my energy dissipate within my body, and I relinquished all control I had. I wanted more than anything to keep my eyes closed and disappear into the void of nothingness, to allow my energy to recuperate, but I knew I needed to check on both Abdu and Nabila to see if they were all right. With all my might, I willed my eyes open. I was still sitting on the stool holding on to Abdu's hand. My left hand was flung back, my wrist curled inwards in an awkward fashion. From the corner of my eye, I could see Abdu beside me, breathing heavy, and I slowly pulled my hand out of his. I glanced at Nabila, who had regained some color to her complexion, despite the fact that she was still unconscious. I felt for her pulse. It was strong. We had done all we could. The rest was going to be up to her. As the minutes ticked on, we sat in silence, recovering from the experience, gathering our thoughts and emotions. As I cradled my weak arm, Abdu ran his fingers through his hair, shook his head in disbelief, then stood and started pacing. I cannot believe it, Flora. If I had not experienced that myself, I would never have thought it possible. How is it possible? Did you see what I saw? Her memories? I saw them, as if the events were happening before my very eyes. I nodded. I did not trust myself to speak. I could understand his disbelief. And were those my memories or yours, of our friendship? They were yours, weren't they? Because I never saw you, so they must have been from a first-person perspective. Once again I nodded. I could feel myself fading. Abdu, do not be alarmed, but I need to lay down to regain my... And before I could finish my sentence, I began to lose vision and hearing as the room began to spin around me, and the last thing I saw was Abdu diving toward me before everything went dark. I awoke to the sound of a rooster and a sweet taste on my lips. Honey. I could taste honey. I was stretched out on the floor next to Nabila's bed, covered up with a light woven blanket. I made to sit up but winced, feeling my left arm and shoulder still extremely tender. My arm was strapped to my torso in a sling bandage. Under me was a comfortable thick grass mat. I slowly sat up, closing my eyes as the room spun around me. When the spinning stopped, I opened my eyes again, and in the candlelight I could see Abdu in prayer on his mat on the other side of the room, prostrating and then sitting on his heels. I looked to Nabila and was pleasantly surprised to see her sitting up, with her head resting against the wall. Very cautiously, I pulled myself along the bed to sit beside her. She opened her eyes and smiled at me, beckoning me to come closer. She extended her hands to me, and I gave her my good right hand. Flora, she whispered. I nodded. Thank you, she whispered again, and gripped my hand harder. No thanks necessary, Auntie, I whispered back. She pointed to my left shoulder and grimaced, shaking her head and tusking with her tongue. Oh, it's a minor injury, I replied, and brought out my left hand from the sling, and very slowly furled and unfurled my fingers to show her that my hand was undamaged. In truth, my fingers screamed in pain, but I did not want Nabila to feel any worse than she did. Alhamdulillah, she replied, motioning to the heavens. Yes, thank God, Alhamdulillah, I agreed. Abdu joined us, sitting on the other side of the small bed, and she took his hand in hers and brought it up to her lips to kiss it. She then did the same with my own hand, placing both her hands on each of her cheeks, cherishing us, thanking us in her own way for saving her life. She was a kind and beautiful soul, and I loved her dearly. She turned to Abdu and spoke in Hindustani, and after a moment Abdu said, My mother says you are a natural-born healer, and you have a gift from God. I'm so ashamed of how I reacted earlier. I did not know such a thing was possible. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at him closely and noticed he was clean-shaven now. He must have groomed himself while I slept. He looked 10 years younger, like the Abdu I knew from the clinic. There is nothing to forgive Abdu. It was a team effort. I'm sure the cinchona fought the malaria, and she was strong enough to withstand the battle in her body. Thanks to you, he said keenly. Thanks to us, I corrected. Yes, us. Flora, how can I ever repay you for this? There is no need to repay me, Abdu. It is my duty of care. Anyone blessed with this gift has a duty by God to heal the sick. It's my life's mission. I know that now, and I am happy to be of service. Flora, you are the most extraordinary person I've ever met. I do not know how I'm so blessed to have you in my life." I blushed, very conscious of both Abdu and Nabila watching me. I felt it was time to go. I needed to rest and negotiate the issue of staying out past curfew. "What is the time?" I asked, gently withdrawing my hand and slowly standing up. Here again my head swam. I steadied myself by placing a hand against the wall and waited for the spinning to abate. "It is almost dawn," Abdu replied. "I need to head back, Abdu." He nodded, and I began quietly packing up the supplies I had brought with me. I glanced at my pocket watch. It was 5 a.m. If I headed off now, I could be at the gate as it opened at 6. I needed to prepare what I was going to say to Mother and Father. I would think on this on the journey home. I hoped that Sanju and the driver were at the carriage when I got there, and that I would not have to go looking for them, wasting even more precious time. When I was packed and ready, I took my leave of Nabila, who once again thanked me profusely and showered me with kisses. Abdu walked me out of her room, but in the hallway, he stopped and turned to face me. "Flora," he reached for my right hand. "I meant what I said in there. You are a most extraordinary woman." And he lifted my hand to his lips and kissed the back of it tenderly. My heart swelled with tenderness for him. The gesture was so genuine and so gentlemanly, I felt flattered. "I hope you know how much you mean to me," he professed. I nodded shyly. "Can I hope in any way that you have the same regard for me?" His eyes were shining, searching mine, and he was still holding my hand. I smiled and nodded bravely. It was the truth. I really did care for this man. "Oh, Flora," he exhaled, and I melted into his hug as he embraced me. My heart was beating so fast, and I could feel the heat flush in my cheeks. Where before I was feeling weak and giddy, at this very moment, everything seemed sharp and clear. I sensed passion and desire flood my body with such fervor, I was taken aback by the intensity and the speed of it. I closed my eyes, savoring the moment, the proximity to his body, the smell of his cologne, and the softness of his throat near my cheek. He pulled me back and very slowly lowered his forehead to touch mine, so that our noses also touched. His left hand was softly caressing the back of my head, playing with my hair, while his right hand cupped my chin ever so gently, and his thumb traced against my lips. I felt a lump rise in my throat. Was he going to kiss me? My heart was beating so loud in my ears, I was almost sure he could hear it too. I could feel the warmth of his breath, and all of a sudden, I did want him to kiss me. I wanted Abdu to be the first man to ever kiss me. I wondered how I would react to his kiss. Would I freeze in panic, or would I turn my head so that his lips landed on my cheek, as we had been taught back at the academy, when we had to escape unwanted advances? We had practiced this moment with our classmates, yet right here, right now, I was embarrassed to admit that his advances were very much wanted. I felt like a woman being loved by a man, and it felt so right. But he did not kiss me. Instead, we remained in our intimate closeness for a few more moments before being interrupted by banging on the front door, and we flew apart like children caught with our hands in a candy jar. I turned away, adjusting my hair and allowing him to regain his composure. I could hear many voices speaking in Hindustani outside, and as Abdu opened the door, I thought I recognized the voice of our butler, Sahib Faraz. The next thing I knew, and to my utter dismay, I heard the sound of my mother's voice piercing my ears. "Where is Flora?" She pushed past him and found me standing right in the hallway of the small house with my belongings in my hand. "Oh, good, you are ready. Well, we must be off. Your father is beside himself. I knew it was against my better judgment to let you come here, and you missed the gala pre-dinner last night. Mother, please, not here in front of everyone." I wanted to say not in front of Abdu, but I could not bring myself to even say that. She glared at me. "Come along, Flora," and she turned, expecting me to follow her. "Mother!" She turned to look at me, surprised at the tone in my voice. "Would you like to see Abdu's mother? This was the reason I came, after all." Mother seemed taken aback for a moment, as if I was once more a naughty child in years gone by that needed correcting, instead of a grown woman who had a job to do. She glanced sharply at Abdu, who was still standing in the door, looking concerned at the scene unfolding before him. "Well, yes, of course, Flora. Where are my manners? Dr. Braxton, how is your mother?" "She is recovering, thanks to the superior nursing skills of Miss Flora. Please follow me. I would like to introduce you to her." Mother had a scowl on her face as she walked past me, following Abdu into Nabila's room. I could not help notice the mud she tracked in with her. I remained in the hallway, and for the next few minutes I concentrated on dissipating my rising anger at being treated like a child, as well as my disappointment at the intrusion into our privacy. Mother emerged soon after, a totally different demeanor about her. "Good job, Flora, but we really must be going. Your father is frightfully worried. If it had not been for the Viceroy's dinner party last night, he would have been storming down the fort gates and sending out a search party." "Of course, Mother," I replied curtly. "Thank you, Dr. Braxton," I mumbled as I walked past him. I just could not look into his eyes. I felt so ashamed of how I had been belittled in front of him. I stepped out into the early dawn to see a beautiful clear sky with an orange sunrise. Most of the water on the ground had been absorbed overnight, and the mud had started to dry in areas. I found a group of villagers waiting for me outside Abdu's house, and they must have been the ones who guided my mother through the alleyway to find me. That, and the fact that a British woman was visiting their village, was extremely newsworthy. As I exited the final alley, I saw that my mother had arrived in the military horse-drawn carriage usually reserved for my father and other high-ranking officials, and standing next to it was none other than the captain of the guard himself, Lawrence Collins. He stared at me but said nothing. I could see he was also fixated on my sling. I quickly removed my hand from within it, stood up taller, and lifted my head higher, ignoring him, and followed my mother to her carriage. My driver was instructed to follow us home. Sanju was nowhere to be seen. "What is he doing here?" I gestured at Lawrence as he led the procession back to the fort. "Your father insisted I be escorted by him. You know how cautious your father is, and when he heard I had let you go alone, well, enough of that now. I have only myself to blame. I should have insisted that Captain Collins chaperone you." "I do not need a chaperone, Mother. I have the driver and Sanju with me." "It is dangerous out here outside the fort, Flora," she replied. "In England I never worried for your safety, but here, among the locals, you never know when they're going to turn on us." "Turn on us? Mother, do you hear yourself? Now, Flora, Captain Collins just told me of attacks in the north where locals are showing resistance to British rule. We must be careful, and the daughter of the lieutenant colonel is a pretty prize for them to take hostage and make all sorts of demands." "Mother, these are not your words. This is fear-mongering, and I will not have you speak ill of these good people. This is a village devastated by disease. They are grateful for our help. Remember who we are, Mother. I have no doubt that Captain Collins has been brainwashing you with this rhetoric all night. Is this why you were so rude to Abdu?" "Shh, now, Flora. You must be tired. All is well that ends well, and when your father sees that you are unharmed and that there was no real danger, he will also forget the harsh things he said." "Why? What things did he say?" "You don't have to worry about that now, dear." As always, Mother never wanted to fill me in on grown-up conversation. I repressed the urge to scream out loud and kept my eyes forward, except all I could see was the back of Captain Collins, whom I was furious with. So I directed my gaze to the side pastures that passed us by, and kept quiet as Mother filled me in on the dinner I had missed at the Viceroy's mansion. "We told the Viceroy that you are not well and were confined to your room, but they are invited to dinner at our house tonight." I let her voice drone on as she told me of her plans. Tomorrow was the royal address of the Viceroy to the colony, followed by the official induction of the Captain of the Guard to Fort St. George. We were expected for a light lunch at the country club, followed by the dreaded gala ball at the officers' club. I felt the pain in my left arm and shoulder return, and I gently drew my arm to my chest, cradling it. Abdu's warm embrace seemed like a lifetime ago, but I closed my eyes and willed my body to remember his touch and his words. As the carriage swayed on the road, I drifted into much-needed rest.